Story 1. My door could only be closed if I was changing clothes. If my parents suspected I was hiding anything, they searched everything to make sure. They went through dresser and desk drawers, bags, the closet, the car, and even my mail. As a result, I became very good at hiding things. Story 2. We held a family council every Sunday night after dinner. We sat together and shared good things that happened that week, expressed any grievances, planned the dinner menu, and assigned chores. It was excellent parenting. If I mention it to my mother now, she brags about it for 20 minutes before we can move on. Story 3. Haiku night dinners. Some nights we spoke in haiku, and only haiku. Story 4. I had to answer the phone. Hello, this is first name last name speaking. Whenever I picked up, this was obviously in the 1980s before caller ID on landlines. My mother tried to make my childhood friends do the same when they called to invite me to play. For example, "Hi, can I talk to Tulpen? Who is this?" "It's me." "Well, when you call this house and I answer, you should say hello. Then tell me your first and last name before asking to speak to Tulpen." Boy, was I popular. Story 5. I had super laid-back parents, but there were a few things they were strangely strict about. No gum. No Play-Doh. No cereal with sugar listed as one of the top 3 ingredients. No watching The Simpsons. I basically had no rules growing up, but those 4 things would make them lose their goddamn minds. I still get anxious when I'm chewing gum, and I'm 35. Story 6. I come from a large family. Anytime we ordered pizza, we ordered several different kinds because we had different preferences. Leftovers were kept in their boxes and placed in the oven. When I did the same with roommates, their reaction was that they had burned the box and asked why it was in the oven. Story 7. If you ran out of toilet paper while using the bathroom, you had to sing the Stranded song or no one in the house would bring you a roll. Story 8. If I got hurt doing an activity, I was not allowed to do it again. My mother ended that rule when I broke my wrist snowboarding at age 16. I did not tell her for a month, and by then I could not move my wrist. It required surgery with a bone graft to repair. Story 9. Not mine, but my mother-in-law and her sister will fuss at you if you wash your hands in the kitchen sink. I think that's weird. If there is a sink and some hand soap, I say go ahead and wash. My wife is not like that. Story 10. We weren't allowed to eat anything without first asking. Even a glass of water required permission. When my boyfriend and I started dating, I would ask his parents for permission to eat or drink if I was hungry or thirsty. It was a hard habit to break when his mother told me I could eat or drink anything except alcohol. It felt strange to just go into the fridge or pantry without permission. I still sometimes have to fight the urge to ask my boyfriend if I can eat our food in our apartment. When I went to my parents' house over Christmas, I was reprimanded for taking an apple without asking. It is also strange, but it used to be normal. Story 11. My dad used to set up Easter egg hunts for my sister and me, so we would follow written clues from place to place as a way to learn to read. Until I was a young adult, I assumed that was how all children did Easter egg hunts. Story 12. Any of the 7 children can play with any toy that is left out. The owner of a toy cannot take it back until the person playing with it is finished. If a toy is put away in the owner's room, permission must be requested. Story 13. I was not allowed to take a shower when I was home alone. When I was 7, I learned that other households closed the bathroom door when using the toilet and that keeping it open was considered unusual. At a friend's house, someone walked by, saw me with the door open, told their mother, who called my mother, and then my family adopted the rule of closing the bathroom door when using the toilet. Story 14. My parents would check my brothers and my teeth for sugar bugs every night after we brushed before bed. If they thought we were trying to skip brushing, they said they could see the sugar bugs and made us brush again. My brother and I were so convinced the sugar bugs were real that we constantly asked when we would be able to see them. My parents always told us only people 13 and older could see them. By the time we turned 13, we had completely forgotten about the sugar bugs. I like thinking about creative parenting tactics like this. I have even used it while babysitting a fussy child who would not brush their teeth or get ready for bed. And it helped a lot. Story 15. My mom used to pay me to be my own babysitter between the ages of 10 to 14. The rule was that, as long as I did not make a mess and put myself to bed before she got home, I received $10 in the morning. Story 16. If you could not find something and asked a sibling or a parent for help, and they found it for you, they may punch you in the arm. Story 17. My mom panics when commercials start, so she mutes the television during breaks. She often mutes it if she thinks a break is coming, even when she is wrong. She does not always notice when the commercials end, so the show stays muted. It is very difficult to watch television with her. Story 18. I had to wash the dishes every night, even when I was not home for the meal. There were times I got home from an away basketball game. I was on the team. It was after 10 p.m., and the dishes had sat since they finished eating around 6:30 p.m. My older brother's nightly chore was taking out the garbage. He would be done in 2 minutes. I would spend more than 30 minutes washing, drying, putting the dishes away, and cleaning the kitchen. Story 19. Maybe it was not a house rule, but when I was 6, my mother told me that if I behaved, she would let me skip school on Saturdays and Sundays. One day my teacher said, "See you Monday," and I knew. Story 20. We were not allowed to go into the refrigerator or the cabinets without asking for permission. My family was very poor, and we had a limited food budget, so eating something without permission could mean using an ingredient my stepmother planned to use in a meal in the next few days. When I went to friends' houses, they ate whatever they wanted. Story 21. Not a rule, but to this day I am befuddled by my mother's reasoning. When I was a boy, we lived in a pretty rural part of Mexico with horrible infrastructure. Power would often go out in the middle of the night. She would wake my brother and me up just to wait for the power to come back on. For the life of me, I could not figure that out. She wasn't afraid of the dark. She just wanted to make sure we saw the power return. Edit. Everyone suggested it was because of fire-related reasons, and, come to think of it, that makes a lot of sense. That's how we lost that house. Maybe my mother was clairvoyant. Story 22. If I told my parents I would leave at a certain time, I had to leave then. For example, if I said I would leave a party at 9, I could not leave at 8:50 or 9:10 without being scolded or grounded. The same applied when I left the house to go somewhere. Story 23. My dad made a rule that I had to kill 7 flies a day during my summer break. Story 24. My family had something we called the food blanket. When we had casual meals, we laid a blanket on the living room floor and ate on it like a picnic. My parents didn't want to get any food on the carpet. Instead of "set the table," my mom would say, "Go lay out the blanket." I remember being confused when I learned that not every family had one. Story 25. When I got in trouble, I was put on reading restriction as a punishment. I loved to read as a kid and still do, so it was an effective punishment at the time. Story 26. My parents used a laissez-faire parenting style. There was no censorship whatsoever. I watched Rocky Horror Picture Show with my brother when I was 7. It was awkward when I brought a video cassette tape with me to a sleepover at a friend's house. The other parents were mortified. Story 27. We weren't allowed to walk in the dining room unless it was for a special occasion. The carpet always had that just vacuumed look, so it was a dead giveaway if anyone walked across it. Story 28. It wasn't my home, but my aunt and uncle never let us use the upstairs washroom when we were kids because they thought we would touch the walls with our dirty hands. They made us urinate in a jar they kept under the kitchen sink and poured it down the drain when we were done. I never thought it was strange until I mentioned it to my cousin a few years ago. We laughed pretty hard about it. Story 29. There was no curfew as long as I told my mom where I would be. I was always honest because I loved being 16. Story 30. I couldn't add the jokes in the song Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. My dad thought it was disrespectful. It's not a house rule. It's just an odd one. Also, when a parent says your name, you have to reply coming, "Not yeah," because they'll ignore it. Story 31. When you enter the house, the first thing to do is change into clean pants and wash your hands. Guests are exempt from the pants rule but not from hand washing. If you take your shoes off while you are out, you must change your socks as well. Story 32. I was literally told by my best friend's dad that I was only allowed to eat popcorn one kernel at a time. Story 33. When I was sick, I could not be in my bed because it would make it dirty. My mom put a towel in a corner on the hardwood floor, and I had to stay there until she deemed me well enough to use my bed. Story 34. My father used to give me all the change in his pocket to leave him and my mother alone so they could shut their bedroom door and talk. It was not until many years later that I realized I was basically pimping out my mother. Story 35. My father never allowed us to talk at the dinner table. When I was 15, I asked everyone at the table how their day had been. He finished his meal quickly, stood up angrily, and said, "I can't stand people talking during a meal. If I wanted to talk to you, I would." We finished our meal in silence. Story 36. I wasn't allowed in my parents' room at all, not even to use their shower if the hall bathroom was occupied and we were running late. Story 37. No swearing, which includes the obvious as well as stupid, idiot, shut up, and fart. Story 38. If you do not get a grades, you do not eat at the table. I genuinely thought this was normal until I had dinner at a friend's house, where his parents were supportive and loving when he brought home a devastating report card. I am not Asian. Story 39. Bare skin was not allowed to touch the leather sofa. Shorts, bare feet, and tank tops were not permitted. We also had to peel mushrooms. Took forever and was completely pointless. Story 40. We had to have milk after dinner but before bed. When I was older, I asked my mom what that was about. She had been raised kosher and hadn't thought about it. She realized we could just have had milk with dinner if we wanted. Story 41. When I was very young, I had a night-night bell. It was an old clay bell that hung in the kitchen. When it was time for bed, I got to ring the bell. Everyone would come to say goodnight, and then I went to bed. It was not a rule, just a small ritual in our house. Story 42. No television before 5 or after 8. Dinner is at 6. Story 43. The room in my house that was used for extra storage was always called the sewing room. I have never seen so much as a sewing machine in there. Thanks, stranger. Story 44. I wasn't allowed to play in the living room as a child. If I played too loud in my room, I was spanked. My father's golden rule was that children are meant to be seen, not heard. As a result, I allow my children to play anywhere in the house, as loudly as they want, as long as they clean up afterward. Just the other day, my son held a rock concert in the living room with his new toy guitar and amplifier. The music was terrible, but his smile made it worth it. Story 45. I was not allowed to leave the table until my meal was finished. I remember eating at a friend's house and feeling very uncomfortable trying to finish a dish I did not like, only to be told, "You do not have to finish it if you do not want to." It was mind-blowing. Story 46. No singing at the table unless it is a birthday. To this day, I do not cope well with quiet. When I was a child, the karaoke party never stopped. It was a good rule but not necessary in most households. Story 47. It was not so much a rule as a tradition. When Dad got home from work, he would immediately change into pajamas, and that was our cue to do the same if we wanted. Watching television shows where someone dropped in by surprise and the parents simply welcomed them in seemed like Hollywood nonsense to me, like the mother who never left the kitchen. Story 48. We had to clean the dishes as soon as everyone finished eating. This included washing, rinsing, drying, putting them away by hand, wiping all surfaces, sweeping the floor, and cleaning the kitchen sinks. It did not matter if your favorite television show was coming on. The dishes were never allowed to wait. We were not allowed to put our elbows on the table. I sat next to my stepfather at dinner, and if I put my elbow on the table, he would stab me in the arm with his fork. That used to make me very angry. We had assigned places at the table, and after bedtime we were allowed only in the bedroom or the bathroom. One night I had a friend sleep over, and in the middle of the night she said she was thirsty and planned to go to the kitchen for a glass of water. Panicked. Story 49. We were not allowed to watch anything remotely sexual. If people were kissing on screen, my mother would freak out, run to cover the television with a pillow, and cough loudly until it was over. Once I tried to see a PG-13 movie with my friends. My mother cried, and my father called me horrible for making her cry. I was 14. Story 50. I cannot go anywhere on my own. It is not a rule, but I get in trouble for going places and I am never given permission to go anywhere. It turns out all my friends can be just about anywhere, and I am left saying I cannot because my mother said no. Story 51. No sliced bread in the house. My parents were perfectly normal in every other sense, but my mom assumed the uncut bakery bread at the grocery store was better quality or healthier. I remember going to a friend's house at about 13 and making a sandwich with pre-sliced bread. It was a game changer, so much easier. My friend and her family laughed, but I was not kidding. It really changed things. I had been cutting my own slices for years and they were always slightly uneven, which made sandwiches a bit of a pain. I went home and immediately demanded sliced bread. Took some convincing, but eventually my mom caved. To this day, my parents still prefer unsliced bread, but whenever I visit, my mom buys a sliced loaf just for me. Story 52. I was not allowed to clear my plate when eating. I always had to leave some food on it. If I wanted to eat that much, I had to get a little more food and leave some on the plate. This is the exact opposite of most household rules. I enjoyed learning about the cultural differences. I am going to bed. Story 53. My sister and I had to read for 30 minutes after school. Our parents were not home, but we would tattle on each other. Another rule was that I could not tell anyone when one uncle was staying with us because he was evading an arrest warrant. This is my most popular post. To clear a few things up, my uncle is not a pedophile or a violent offender. He is an addict and a thief. We were not taught to snitch on each other. We were just enemies. Looking back, we could have gotten away with a lot if we had teamed up. Update 2, my first coins. Thank you, kind stranger. Update 3, and silver. Thank you, wise oracle. Story 54. I grew up with 6 siblings. In the television room, there were more people than couch seats. We had a rule that you could not take someone's seat if they got up to go to the bathroom or to get a drink. My parents instituted it because of all the fights that happened over seats. We all instantly realized how great the rule was. No more arguments, and more importantly, your seat was safe for the night. I never thought it was a normal rule as defined by the original poster, but it is a great rule that every family should have. Story 55. Vegetables. A little or a lot. That was my mom's response when I did not want to eat them. Story 56. If I talked back, I would get quiet days where I was not allowed to talk to my parents for the rest of the day. If I did speak, I would lose privileges like my phone or be grounded. Kind of weird looking back. Story 57. We had a no-go room, a room we couldn't enter because it was full of antiques. My black friend wasn't allowed to come over. I didn't know why, so I invited her anyway and we walked to my house after school. I didn't realize that the Black history memorabilia my dad had displayed was actually racist. We had a black maid when I was little, so I never noticed anything wrong with it. The memorabilia was promptly moved to the attic instead of having a display corner, but my dad still didn't want her over. He said, "No use rubbing her face in a house she'll never have." I realized then that my dad was an asshole. Story 58. If my sister and I made a mess in our bedroom, my mom would toss everything, including items that were already in their proper places, into a pile in the middle of the room, so we had to clean an even larger mess. I love her dearly, but when it comes to cleaning, phew. Story 59. Our bedtime in high school was 9 in the evening. We were not allowed to eat any food past 7 in the evening. Story 60. When friends are at the door, do not feed them, give them drinks, or let them in to use the bathroom for any reason. Story 61. My dad always tells me not to lock any doors in the house, including my bedroom and bathroom doors. Story 62. This is probably a little different from everyone else because I lived on a tree farm in Montana. We had a few rules that made sense, but they were for problems not many people have to deal with. Here are some of the rules. Do not pet the deer. Do not shoot toward the house or toward people. Do not go sledding in the road. Do not go outside without a walkie-talkie because we were in the middle of nowhere. I needed to be able to help my parents find me if I went too far. If you are outside, you must be loud to let the bears know you are there. If you are outside, Keep the dogs near you. Do not eat berries you find in the woods. If you find feces that is not deer or dog feces, turn around. There were probably more rules. Plus the obvious things. Do not talk to strangers, do not feed the dogs chocolate, do not touch the stove, and so on. Story 63. Keep bread in the freezer. Apparently, not many people do that. Story 64. Children were not allowed to speak unless spoken to. I come from an abusive household, and one day my neighbors came by to visit. I was in the dining room finishing my homework. My stepfather at the time was entertaining our guests when I decided to enter the living room to grab extra pencils for my homework. The neighbors were about to head home when I said, "Thank you for coming. It was nice having you today." My stepfather rose from the sofa, grabbed his drink, and threw it against the wall behind me. He said, "Children are meant to be seen and not heard. Speak when you are spoken to." Then aggressively grabbed me by the arm and dragged me into the hallway out of sight. The neighbors asked me the next day if I was okay. At the time, I did not really understand why and thought this was normal until my junior year of high school. To this day, I do not speak unless someone speaks to me directly. Update. I was not expecting all the support and kindness. Thank you. I am 21 now, and my parents are divorced. I have a stutter and am very shy, but I am eager for friendship and relationships. Old habits die hard, and I remain shy. I sincerely appreciate your support. Story 65. We were not allowed to listen to Marilyn Manson. Yet our mother listened to Rob Zombie, 9 Inch Nails, and Ministry. Story 66. I had so many, but here are a few that really stuck with me. 1. This rule was short-lived but damaging nonetheless. As a very talkative and creative kid, I often annoyed my parents with random questions or ideas. Instead of encouraging the imagination of an 8-year-old, my parents gave me a daily word limit. For example, I was only allowed to say 10 words that day unless it was an emergency such as a serious injury or fire. The word count ranged from 10 to 50 words depending on my mother's mood. This only lasted about 2 weeks but was still damaging. 2. This rule was enforced by my older siblings, who babysat my younger brothers and me most weekdays because my mother worked and my father slept. My 3 younger brothers and I participated in tournament-style fights to establish a hierarchy. If you were dominant over someone, you had complete control over them. You could kick people off the couch, steal toys and food, or do whatever you wanted. At the end, my oldest brother always fought the winner. He was always the most dominant, and therefore we had to do what he said all the time. My mother did not enforce these rules and did not stop my older brother from enforcing them as he saw fit. Sorry for the rant, laughing out loud. Summary. A daily limit on the number of words I could say, and tournament-style fights to determine who could boss others around. Story 67. I am not allowed to lock my bedroom door, even when I am changing or have just gotten out of the shower. Story 68. I am not allowed to hang out with girls at all. I am male. Thank you for all the upvotes. Story 69. No romantic relationships until you are 18. In my case, it seems it will continue even longer. Story 70. I did not drink soda except when I was at a friend's house because that was usually all they had. My parents were very health conscious, so they mostly drank water, juice, tea, and lemonade. Story 71. We had cereal for breakfast on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. On Tuesdays and Thursdays we had eggs. I thought everyone did something similar. Story 72. I was not aware that other kids had no homework over the summer. My mom assigned papers, projects, reading assignments, and math workbooks. A real summer sounds fun. Story 73. The phrase sorry means you'll never do it again, or immediate apologies met with contempt, meant I should not apologize unless I was prepared to make a significant commitment to change. This had 2 outcomes. 1. Apologize and never do the bad thing again. 2. More often, because it is hard to ensure you never do something again, delay the apology until I have had an opportunity to demonstrate effort to change, and then apologize verbally with my actions legitimizing the apology. It was only pointed out to me yesterday by my significant other that it is extremely frustrating and emotionally taxing for her that I do not apologize, even though I take responsibility and change my behavior when I have been thoughtless or selfish. Story 74. Lid down before you flush. I thought it was weird as a kid, but I understand it now. Little bits of whatever is in the bowl aerosolize when you flush. If the lid is down, it is less gross than it raining fecal bacteria on your toothbrush. As a child, my family was the only household I visited where the toilet lids were kept down. I have recently taught this rule to my significant other about my apartment. He always puts down the seat, which is very kind of him, and now he puts down the lid too. I love him, but his fecal bacteria can stay off my toothbrush. Edit. A study in the Journal of Hospital Infection reports bacterial spread with the lid up versus down. I am glad you all like Mythbusters as much as I do, but this is also worth a read. Story 75. I never told anyone how my parents acted in private. They put on a good show in public, so everyone thought they were great. Things could have been worse, but I was mentally and verbally abused and emotionally abandoned at a young age. I wish she had been the mother at home that she appeared to be in public. Both of them are cut off from my life now, and it feels freeing. Story 76. Not everyone knows how to wipe down a counter correctly. My grandmother made us take etiquette classes. We had to walk in heels with books on our heads, learn to set a table for any occasion, and practice proper table manners. It has come in handy at work dinners, but it was strange to learn that no other family did this. Story 77. Finishing all the food on my plate. I was 7 or somewhere around there, and couldn't handle eating spaghetti squash. The taste triggered my gag reflex. I vomited after my stepdad demanded I eat it. I stared at the vomit, crying, and he made me eat some of it, saying I was wasting food. He doesn't deserve the title dad anywhere near his name. Story 78. No eating outside the dining room, and do not eat until everyone is at the table. Do not touch or move any of my father's pens, no matter how cheap. Do not do laundry without permission. Do not shower without permission, and do not ask to shower in the mornings. Your space, body, and hair do not belong to you until you are 18, and parents decide what you are allowed to do with them. This got more traction than I expected, so I will explain a couple of things. First, I am a woman. At the time of these rules, it was my father and stepmother. They did not sexually abuse us. There was some mild physical abuse from time to time, usually directed at me because I was the oldest. I never wanted to do anything wild with my hair or body, but I grew my bangs out starting at age 12. If they were loose or not pinned back, my father would threaten to cut all my hair off. My father was not a collector of pens. He was quick to anger over the smallest things. We were actually very well-behaved kids, but our house rules did not reflect that. This is not an exhaustive list of all the rules in our house. I have blocked out much of my adolescence. My parents are or were mentally ill and viewed their children as a major inconvenience to their lives. I appreciate the supportive replies. They are very validating. Not all abuse is physical, and I struggle to call what we lived with growing up abusive. I am on better terms with my parents now that I live a few hours away. Lastly, if you are a minor living with parents like these and you feel lonely or desperate, please do not hesitate to direct message me. I know how isolating this life can be. Story 79. When I was at home, I was expected to spend my leisure time with my family and not stay in my own room. If I wanted to play games, I had to set up my personal computer or laptop at the table in the common area. If I wanted to read, I could not stay in my room. I had to be in the living room and share those moments with the family. I thought it was normal as a kid that I had no personal time aside from sleeping. My parents wanted me to do homework, read, or do anything where they could see me and where we hung out as a family. Apparently, other people were allowed to have their own free time and be completely alone. What a shock that was for me. I am deeply troubled by this now. I feel the urge to grow independent, but at the same time I feel guilty for not being constantly tied to my family, even when it is just about reading in my own room. Story 80. This is 100% true. Visitors were never allowed inside. If someone came to play or hang out, you had to go out to the yard to entertain them day or night. Likewise, we were not allowed to go into other people's homes. I have had many conversations on porches. Story 81. When riding in the car at night, It is illegal to have the interior dome light on. I genuinely believed that was true until I was about 28 years old. Story 82. No screaming while playing. My mom said someone might think I was in trouble and needed help. Story 83. Eating dinner as a family at the table was an idea many people I met in college found absurd. Story 84. It was not so much that I thought every household followed these rules, but I did consider them normal. 1. When guests came over, boys and girls did not play together. 2. Friends who came into your room had to be the same gender as you. 3. If you got in trouble, you were not allowed to read except the Bible. 4. Do not listen to rock music because it was considered inherently evil, no matter who performed it or what the lyrics said. 5. You were not allowed to enter the house of anyone whose parents my parents were not friends with, even if you played with their child every day. He was allowed in our house, however. 6. We did not celebrate Halloween. Anyone who did was seen as inviting evil spirits into their bodies and homes. 7. If we went somewhere, even to the store, you wore non-denim pants and a collared shirt, and your sisters wore long skirts. Even at home, sisters never wore slim-cut pants or shorts above the knee. 8. Sometimes we anointed people with oil and offered loud prayers for divine healing or guidance. My parents have loosened up on some things since then, but that is how I grew up. 1. The organization was the Institute in Basic Life Principles, run by Bill Gothard. We used to attend his conventions every year. I started calling it GothCon and the name stuck. 2. I will not do an Ask Me Anything from this account. I use Reddit for jokes, encouragement, talking about baseball, and promoting my nerdcore rap project. 3. Although what I described may sound extreme, our experience was relatively tame compared with many people we knew. My parents are overall rational, intelligent people, and over time they worked to regain balance from some of the extreme views they had adopted. I understand they were overcorrecting after a lack of structure or control in their own upbringing, which does not excuse everything but helps me see it without too much bitterness. 4. I do not want my past to define the rest of my life. I can see how it affected me, and I am taking steps to address those issues on my own terms. You only get one life, and there is no use trying to climb back up the slide. Because some of you are still asking, no, I was not raised Mormon. The Institute in Basic Life Principles is not a Mormon organization. One of my childhood friends is now a Mormon missionary. Story 85. My dad had a horrible rule. He checked our genitals, including my sister's. It ended when my sister, who was 16, called Child Protective Services on him. He was arrested for sexual assault. Story 86. We sleep at 9:30 in the evening. No noise is allowed after 8 o'clock in the evening. Dad works an early morning shift. Story 87. Moroccan ramen was made on a stove. You drain all the water before adding the seasoning packet, then add sliced Velveeta. It is not so much a rule, but my mind was blown when I first had proper ramen and when I learned that the is pronounced like a rather than a hard A. My mom still calls them Rayman noodles. Story 88. Well, I had a traumatic experience, to be honest. I was not allowed to eat certain things like cheese or drink milk. I could only have bread and butter. I ate a normal meal once a day. I was not allowed sugar or any kind of candy. My younger sister was spoiled with all that. I never received clothes unless I visited my grandparents. Everything I wore was too small. For me, I never had pocket money, and I was not allowed to be sick. If I was, I would be screamed at. I thought that was normal for everyone until I realized it was toxic and harmful. I have moved out of that household and I live with my dad now. Before, I was extremely underweight. Now I have gained a lot of weight and I am at a healthy weight. I feel better and safer here. Story 89. The limit was 2 books per person until I volunteered at the library at age 14 and learned it was my mother's rule, not the library's. Story 90. It was not so much a rule, but I adopted rules based on what television characters did. I guess my parents, especially my mother, assumed that was normal. Story 91. We were not allowed to have anything to drink during dinner, not even water until we finished eating. Story 92. Sorry, I can't assist with content that describes sexual activity involving a minor. We were not allowed to take water to our bedrooms or get a glass of water during the night. If we became thirsty, we had to wait until morning. I have always had a dry mouth and could not sleep once I woke up thirsty. I used to sneak out of bed and use the sink plug as a tiny cup. It was moldy and tasted like soap, but it felt like the best water I had ever had. One night I was caught, and afterward I was too afraid to drink from the sink. I cannot sleep now unless I have a full bottle of water next to my bed. If you would like further adjustments for Azure text-to-speech, tell me the preferred voice, speed, or style. If you need help because of abuse, contact local emergency services or a support hotline. I can help find resources for your country. Story 93. This is not my family's rule, but my sister dated a guy whose dad did not allow dishes in the sink. Walking into someone's house with a spotless sink and dishes on the kitchen table is bizarre. Story 94. My mom would lose it if a friend opened our fridge. I would get a talking to after they left. Apparently, it was a very personal space for her. I thought that was normal, and I was terrified when my friends asked me to look for something in their fridge. Story 95. I had to earn bottles of water and plates of food. Earning it meant perfectly following arbitrary rules based more on avoiding my father's anger than on morality, or doing chores like cleaning the kitchen. If I didn't earn my food or water, I wouldn't get any. Maybe 1/3 of the time I would get a little water or a little food to get by. Story 96. We had to say hi to everyone when we arrived or when people came over. We also had to say goodbye when people left or when we left. It was non-negotiable. We had to hug the men and kiss the girls' cheeks. Now I realize you can just say hi to everyone at the same time. I also had to tell my mom everything I ate. I wouldn't eat anything without asking her, even beverages. Story 97. If you felt the need to lock a door in a house you did not pay the bills for, then you did not need doors. There were no bedroom, bathroom, or closet doors. They were all in my mom's closet. She got a door. Story 98. God. Where do I begin? The first rule was probably the gun rule. There were guns strategically placed in areas that my brother or I could get to in the event of an apocalypse, because no other reason explains why there were so many guns hidden. We weren't even allowed to breathe in the same room as these guns. We just had to know where they were. Then came the doomsday prepping ordeal. I went over to my friend's house and asked, "Where's your seed bank?" They replied, where you take airtight containers and store seeds in them, used for currency when our banks shut down. I was never invited back. Another rule was that we were not allowed to touch anything in the house. Growing up with a historian, our home decor consisted of expensive pieces from different periods. I can understand the rule, but it gave me severe anxiety when I went anywhere because I was so afraid to touch anything. The last rule that seemed ridiculous was the no internet rule. Dad thought the internet was the devil and that getting it meant letting demons into the house. I don't mean that literally. He believed the internet was evil, so having it was taboo. I didn't have internet until I moved in with my boyfriend at 18. Story 99. We had a rule that you had to say, "No one is to take my place," if you got up to get a drink or go to the bathroom. Otherwise, your place was free to be taken. There were 6 of us and not enough seats for everyone to watch television comfortably. We also had the "you cut, I choose" rule. When dividing anything like cake, sweets, and so on, the person doing the division had to be served last, which meant we were scrupulously fair about dividing things. I thought every family had this rule, but my husband's mother had a policy of giving half of anything to the next person when dividing things, on the basis that you never run out that way. That meant honored guests got huge portions, and the lower down the list, the smaller your portion would be. Story 100. When adults are smoking marijuana, you have to be on the other side of the room, but it is fine to sit next to people who are smoking cigarettes. Story 101. No food in bedrooms. That rule came from my mother being fed up with food stains on the carpets and sheets and crumbs in the bed. You were allowed 1 cup for the day. No getting a fresh cup with each drink of water. We could get a new one if it had milk or juice in it, but if it was water or Kool-Aid, you reused the same cup all day. That rule came from having 6 children in the house plus their friends and running out of dishes when everyone kept getting a fresh glass. I did not realize this was not common until I got married and my husband asked why I would put all my other dishes in the sink but sometimes leave my cup out. I solved the difference by switching to a water bottle and using cups only for milk, which I always put in the sink or dishwasher immediately. Story 102. If a door is closed, treat it as if it is locked. It was an effective way to make people knock. Waiting for someone to invite me and taught me that everyone deserves their own space. My friends think it is odd that I knock on closed doors, but I think it is a good habit. Story 103. We were not allowed to do chores. My parents did not trust us to clean the house or to do the yard work the way they wanted. We had to wash our own dishes when we cooked, but never after a family meal. We were not allowed to do our own laundry until we went away to college. I still do not know how to mow a lawn, and I am 27. Story 104. My mom gave me a kitchen timer to use whenever I used the computer. 1 hour of games per week when I was a small child. It was only much later that I realized many of my friends had far more freedom to play whatever and whenever they wanted, and I resented my parents for it. Even later, I understood the timer probably kept me in school, because my younger self would have gamed my entire education away. Story 105. 1. Bang on the wall if mummy is making too much noise when she is having sex. 2. Put mummy on her side and go to a payphone or to the doctor's office to call 999 if she has had too much and cannot move. 3. Don't touch mummy's needle box. 4. Never answer the front door in case it is debt collectors. 5. If mummy is too tired or not home to walk you to school, go straight to school and be careful when crossing the road. My childhood was pretty messed up in retrospect. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.